Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everybody, I'm Troy Moling, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Hope you've had a good week. The leaves have been falling and the days are getting shorter. We're less than 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving. Hope you're gearing up for that, because we're gearing up for another fun show. Trade talk, land values, water conservation, all those things on tap for the show this week. Our weekly market analysis is coming up too. First though, let's look at the crop numbers, and I love seeing these harvest numbers get bigger and bigger each week. The USDA's latest report sets corn at 76% harvested, and that's roughly in line with the 5-year average. Soybeans are 83% complete and 6 points behind the 5-year average. The winter wheat crop is 84% planted, with 70% of that crop now emerged. We'll dive into those numbers and more with our market analyst. Todd Hultman is our first guest this week. He's a grain market analyst with DTN. We always love hearing his insight. Todd, thanks for being here this week.
Thank you, Troy.
Well, to begin, it seems like harvest is chugging along. How's it look from your perspective?
It's a bit split. A month and a half ago, everything looked great. We were looking for a big corn harvest and a record soybean harvest, and then we got this just massive wave after wave of rain through a lot of the Midwest and even snow in some areas. So I think corn will do probably just fine and come out still close to its target, and USDA will have another number for us on Thursday. But in the case of soybeans, there's been a lot of damage done, and to be honest, I don't think we'll probably have a good crop assessment for that till maybe the grain stocks report in January.
What role do you see weather playing in the short term?
In the short term, probably the damage is done, and we are near the backside of the harvest. On the western side, it sounds like things will be drier, so that'll help us get things done. But we also have some cold weather coming in, so it still remains a bit up in the air.
Soybean planting is moving along well in Brazil. Anything we need to keep an eye on there as to how it could affect producers here at home? Yeah,
well, certainly. South America is something we're going to continue to monitor through the growing season. And as you say, they're off to a good growing start. It looks like they have broad coverage of beneficial rain. Now, some areas, they might be in danger of getting too much rain. And in fact, this week there are some concerns about possible flooding in parts of Argentina. So we'll continue to watch those things. But still, overall, we're looking for a bigger crop from Brazil and Argentina.
So when I last spoke to you in August, I got your thoughts on the trade issues with China. Here we are in November, and still, we've got trade issues with China. Trump did say he's going to meet with China's president at the G20 summit in a few weeks. Any cause for optimism here?
Cautious optimism, I'll say. There's certainly still a good argument for both sides to get together and find some kind of common ground on this issue, and especially in the area of soybeans. Another factor that has come into play is just recently Brazil has elected a new president, and while he seems to be very pro expanding their soybean acre base, at the same time he's very reluctant to encourage any more Chinese investment in Brazil. He's very concerned about the influence they're having in their country. So that's another kind of a wild card into this situation that may help China come to the table.
Anything else you're following as we get closer to wrapping up harvest?
Well, the big concern has been the same concern all year, and that's our trade status with China, and especially for our soybeans. We have seen almost no participation in our export markets from China in the new crop season, and that's been a bit of a surprise, just how firm they are in their stance to avoid U.S. markets. Some are saying they could be able to continue that stance of basically no U.S. soybeans until Brazil's next crop comes due. I'm still not completely certain about that. We'll watch it, but that is certainly a big cause of concern for our soybean market. But the number one concern right now is what are we going to do with all this corn and soybeans that we have out there, and definitely we need to get our trade going to move that grain along.
And finally, any news from DTN as we get closer to the end of the year?
Well, we've got our big Ag Summit in Chicago coming up first week of December. We always look forward to that. We get together with customers and have lots of great speakers and topics and informal conversations as well. So always looking forward to that.
Todd Hultman, we appreciate your time. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you, Troy.
Next week, we'll be joined by author and analyst Elaine Cubb. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask Elaine, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. A few weeks ago, 2 representatives from the Nebraska Water Center joined us on the show to tell us about an upcoming event. The Regional Water Symposium recently ended and brought water leaders together under one roof to discuss the unique challenges of managing, conserving, and understanding water. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh was there and has this report.
It's the only place I've ever lived, literally, where you could go out and visit the state and folks will say, hey, my name's John, I'm a 5th generation Nebraskan from Kearney, or I'm Jennifer, I'm a 6th generation Nebraskan from Red Cloud, or my name's Henry, and my people were Nebraskans before there was a Nebraska. It's a powerful place, and it's a powerful connection between the people and the place. And I think it ties nicely to the conversations that you're going to be having about resilient natural ecosystems.
And with those words, Vice Chancellor of Agriculture and Natural Resources Mike Boehm kicked off the 2018 Water Symposium hosted by the Nebraska Water Center on the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Innovation Campus. This year, however, the symposium was bigger than before, turning from statewide to a regional-based event.
So we're here at the symposium to really take a look at water from a regional perspective. 9 states within the Missouri and Arkansas River basins, which of course includes Nebraska, and we've got headwater states like Montana represented, all the way down to Oklahoma and Arkansas, kind of in the south and southeastern United States.
Many people came from across the region to discuss their take on the symposium's central theme.
So we're here to talk about water management as it pertains to agriculture, but also as it pertains to communities, drinking water, and just how to responsibly manage our water resources.
The symposium also featured a poster contest which allowed graduate students studying topics related to water management to present their research and receive feedback on how they can improve their studies.
I honestly am passionate about water systems. It's something I've always loved. My family's farmers. We really just hold up the environment that we live in, our land, our water, more than anything. And so I saw pretty much all of the opportunities to better the way that people were doing treatment and civil engineering as a whole, and I kept seeing that, and so I realized that that's definitely where I should be. This is my first semester of my master's degree, and I really just wanted the good input on where to go with this and pretty much how they think it's turning out, what I should do next.
Jesse said the symposium had a much bigger turnout than past years, owing to the fact that it was open to more than just Nebraskans. After 3 days of scheduled events, including discussions, breakout sessions, and tours of Innovation Campus's plant and food science labs, Jesse says he hopes people will be able to look at the bigger picture when it comes to water.
I think the goal here is really to start looking at water from a more regional perspective. We all, I think in our states, tend to focus on water in our municipalities, in our backyards, in our faucets. But water is a very integrated system, and we were joking a few weeks ago that what happens in North Dakota doesn't stay in North Dakota from a water perspective, because those are the states where our water often is derived from. So when we tend to look at these things from a regional perspective, I think it gives us a chance to manage water in a better way.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
And you heard Maddie mention the poster contest in that story. Well, the winning poster was from Rebecca Wiseman, who you saw being interviewed. She's a student at Oklahoma State University and received $500 for her winning poster. Its topic? How Aeration Basin Optimization is Your City's Salvation. Love that title. Congratulations to her. For the 40th year, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln has conducted a survey on land values and cash rents across the state. Researchers estimate land values as of February 1st of the current year compared to February 1st of the prior year. Their numbers show land values to be down roughly 10 to 15% from the highs of 2014. And of course, when you're dealing with such an important issue, there's going to be lots of questions. I sat down with UNL Extension agricultural economist Jim Jansen to get some answers.
Some folks may be wondering, why are my property tax assessments going up if the estimated market value of land has declined? The thing that we will point out to those individuals would be there's a difference between the way we calculate the market value when we have a willing buyer, willing seller, available sources of financing, versus the assessed value. Remember, the assessed value on agricultural land, which is different than commercial or residential property, is based off a 3-year median ag land value. So if we're looking back over the last 3 years of sales, the last 3 years they may have not been the high, but they're very close to the high.
So when a landowner wants to rent out his or her land, is there a better time in the year than others for that landowner to get the most money for that land?
So when we talk about setting cash rents, roughly half the ground in the state of Nebraska, whether it's for row crops, small grains, or grazing land, is rented out. Many folks like to have their prospective tenant lined up for this upcoming production year in 2019. The sooner the better in their mind. One, in part, many tenants are lining up key ag inputs, seed, fertilizer, chemicals, whatever it might be. Most individuals have a lease that take effect March 1st, say for example March 1st, 2019 through February 28th or 29th if it'd be a leap year in 2020. What I've been encouraging many folks to look about or talk about is maybe make a verbal commitment. Yes, you can rent my land. We might hold off on setting our 2019 cash rent until we have more certainty on where the major commodity prices, and examples, corn, soybeans, pigs, beef cattle, whatever it might be. There's a lot of uncertainty in trade right now. That being said, we have to be thinking about what is the most equitable rate to be setting cash rents.
And for irrigated land, I know that the rental rates are sometimes a little bit different, maybe a little more complicated in that instance. Talk about what happens in a case like that with the irrigated land.
Right. Nebraska leads the United States in terms of the number of irrigated cropland acres here. Estimates peg it somewhere between 9 to 9.25 million acres. That being said, irrigated cropland, whether it's center pivot or gravity irrigated, tend to rent for more than what dryland cropland does. You're raising more yield, you have more stability in your yields, you don't have extremes in the fluctuations. That being said, there are key components to the irrigated cropland that might include the pivot, the power unit, the well, the pump. Related to these improvements, many individuals that have expressed interest on this topic to us at Nebraska Extension, how do we adjust irrigated cropland rental rate if the landlord does not own the pivot, the power unit, or some other component of the system? From our work that we recently completed here in June at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln from our special features section, we looked at that specific question. What would you discount the cash rental rate in the event the landlord doesn't own the pivot, doesn't own the power unit? Or the third thing that many folks focus on is, how do you conduct maintenance related to the irrigation system? Who's doing that? Is it the landlord, the tenant, the landlord and the tenant? Or even do you hire a third party to do that? So recent research findings we found on that evaluated the discount rate per acre.
So if a landowner has some land that they're wanting to rent out, what do you think are some recommended ways to negotiate a price that's fair for both sides?
If you're looking to either rent land or rent land out, first thing we need to understand is how productive is the ground. What would be a reasonable expectation related to the crop yield? How many cow-calf pairs can I put under there under normal circumstances? How related to the crop yields, how consistent are they? Do we have extreme fluctuations when we have drought? Or do we have irrigation out there that even when it was 2012, our yields maybe were down, but not as down as much as our dryland counterparts were? So one, we need to have effective understanding of what the yield potential is on the land. Two, where are the expectations of the landlord and the producer? That's a key component related to the prices for the commodities we're raising, corn, soybeans, cattle, whatever it might be. And the third thing is, what does that mean for crop revenue or livestock revenue on a per acre or per head or whatever basis? We need to talk about identifying a rental rate that is equitable given the needs of both parties involved. And if there is concern about where these prices, yields, or whatever might end up in 2019, we might take a look at a thing called a flexible cash lease. Let the cash rental rate within a range flex according to some factor such as crop yield, crop price, crop revenue, whatever it might be, that more equitably divides the cash rental rates to reflect those major things.
So land values in Nebraska, they have been decreasing over the last several years. Any early guesses as to what 2019 may hold?
There are two major things we look at. The earning potential, so whether you rent the land out, you own the land and farm it, what are your returns per acre? So where are the returns headed? And the second major thing is interest rates. Interest rates to finance long-term debt on a land loan. Those interest rates get into a thing called a capitalization rate, and there's traditionally an inverse relationship between interest rates and the market value of an asset. An example, when we had very competitive financing on purchasing new vehicles several years ago, say 0%, 0.9%, the values of the vehicle became quite high. If we are paying 5.9% or 6.9% to finance a 3-year loan on a vehicle, that would probably get bidded into the value of the vehicle or the value of the asset. Tentatively speaking, the Federal Reserve looks to be raising interest rates, as well as returns look to be down somewhat for maybe 2019 based upon where current prices are at.
Okay, now I understand this can be a pretty confusing topic. That's why UNL Extension offers free programs all over the state that are open to the public to help in answering any questions and making the right decisions. Now, we'll have all this information online and on our social media pages too, but here it is right now if you want to write it down. The first meeting is November 19th in South Sioux City at the Northeast Community College Extended Campus. There's one on the 20th in Columbus at the Platte County Extension Office, and the last one in November will be in Broken Bow on the 26th. That's in the 4-H building at the fairgrounds. Next month, there are meetings too. We've got one December 3rd at the Divots Convention Center. We've got one the 12th in Alma at the Harlan County Extension Office. Ogallala will be on the 13th at Mid-Plains Community College. December 14th at the Dawson County Extension Office in Lexington. We've got Gage County Extension in Beatrice on the 19th. Then finally, you can also attend a meeting on December 20th in Hastings at the Adams County Fairgrounds. Of course, you can get more info at your local extension office or by emailing Jim at jjansen@unl.edu. In Nebraska, seeding a cover crop can come with certain risks and unknowns. When this involves interseeding into a standing cash crop while flying 135 to 140 miles per hour, it brings a whole new set of challenges to the table. Aerial interseeding of cover crops has been a hot topic at various meetings and field days, with the most recent boom in cover crop interest. But it's something Roth Aerial of Milford has been doing for over 40 years. Read about Roth Aerial's experience seeding cover crops aerially in the November Nebraska Farmer. Late last month, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue urged farmers to be patient as payments for the USDA's Market Facilitation Program continue to roll out. These are the first half of the payments, with Perdue saying the second round should arrive before Christmas. I sat down with UNL agricultural economist Dr. Brad Lubben to get an update on the MFP program and learn what farmers can do to minimize their risk during these tenuous times. So I'd like to talk about any updates that have happened in regards to the USDA Trade Assistant Package, and also for folks who aren't as familiar with what happened with that, maybe give a quick refresher on it too.
Yeah. Well, you know, Secretary of Agriculture has talked about helping to support ag as long as ag was suffering from the ongoing trade conflict. and they announced a package of assistance, originally advertised as up to $12 billion of assistance, but a first round, at least here, that adds up to something around $6 billion, that would offer the market facilitation program payments to producers of commodities that suffered trade losses.
Right, certain groups, yeah.
Certain commodities. That's where we see the payment rate on 50% of 2018 production as a first round of assistance. We also saw some promises of commodity purchases, typically purchases of some of those specialty crops, and as well as meat and dairy products, to go towards some of the food programs, school lunches, food banks, etc. That helps support overall demand, that helps support prices in the absence of some of that export demand. And then we see a little bit of support also put into more market promotion and development through USDA's Foreign Ag Service and through the leveraging of partnerships with private sector groups. That's a little bit in limbo as some of the funding for those market development programs is also in limbo with an expired farm bill. But fundamentally, that was the assistance offered, to try and make direct payments or commodity purchases or additional market promotion efforts to help producers through the current situation.
So it seems like this season has been especially tough for a lot of producers because you've got the uncertainty with the trade, with the farm bill delay, commodity prices have been kind of sketchy too. So what are some risk management tools that producers can use?
You know, it's fair to say that we've often looked at farm policy and farm programs as a risk management tool, and yet at the moment we're watching the policy developments as a risk itself. You've got uncertainty with an expired farm bill, you've got the ongoing trade conflict, the promises of potential trade agreements or negotiations in the wings, but yet ongoing conflict with losses. You have uncertainty relating to bioenergy policy and the impact on biofuel demand. You have uncertainty on environmental policy and immigration policy, and on down the road. We're probably dealing with as much policy risk today as perhaps we ever have. And yet, to get through this, to manage through it, producers still have to put together a good, integrated, sound risk management plan that can fundamentally get them through regardless of the environment they're working in. And I think of the typical crop and livestock producer. They face production risk. They need to look at their production decisions as well as their insurance options if they have them. They face marketing risk, and they need to manage that marketing risk, whether it's being an aggressive hedger or whether it's looking at other marketing alternatives. They need to understand their financial risk, and clearly managing production and marketing risk are a component of that. And they need to manage policy risk. And they need to remember that those aren't sort of four independent things to do. Those are all part of one bigger portfolio.
Part of the puzzle, yeah.
What you do on production risk complements what you do on marketing risk, which is also affected by what you do with farm program participation. It's not four separate games, it's one big portfolio. That's a challenge to even communicate, let alone analyze and make decisions on. But it clearly is one of the challenges we have to work on. It helps explain why risk management is such a critical area to focus on.
Thanks again to Brad for coming on the show and providing that insight. It's time now for weather with Nebraska Extension ag climatologist and Market Journal chief meteorologist Al Dutcher. And Al, I've been feeling the chill in the air this week. I know I'm not alone. What's the latest forecast looking like?
Well, Troy, you are correct. We talked last week about the cold air coming in during the early part of the week. The only difference between last week's forecast and this week, what actually occurred was we got those reinforcing shots of cold air during the midweek period. And the little precipitation event that was advertised last week to follow the Kansas-Nebraska border actually was a little bit stronger and actually was a little bit farther toward the north. So we did see some accumulating snowfall, with the heaviest of it south of Interstate 80 in southwest and south central Nebraska. The good news is that from a standpoint of precipitation, it doesn't look like we're going to deal with much during this next 7-day period. Unfortunately, the models are extending the cold a little bit longer than they were last week before we start to see a moderation in temperature. So we go to the upper air chart, the thing I'll draw your attention to is a system that moved through the region is already up into the northeast, and you can see this big broad trough that has developed across the center part of the country, bringing that Arctic air in. Now, we do have surface lows up in the western Dakotas and in northeastern New Mexico, but unfortunately, the amount of moisture that's going to be brought northward is not insufficient to cause widespread precipitation, but a lot of flurries are likely to occur across the northern plains. And then this trough begins to intensify and really brings down the cooler air into our region. As Canadian high pressure slips into the central plains, we're basically going to stay cooler than normal, with a scattering of flurries likely, with the best chance probably across the Panhandle and the northern plains. And then this trough kind of pivots a little bit by Monday toward the Great Lakes, and this flow comes straight out of the north, right down the eastern portion of the state, which we'll see the coldest temperatures. Another high pressure system slides toward the south. That'll leave dry weather with most of the flurry activities associated with the Great Lakes and heavy moisture along the Gulf Coast as the storm system moves up the eastern seaboard as we go on the day on Tuesday with that big trough. So here's the high pressures firmly in control from northwestern United States all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Dry conditions, of course, under that type of scenario here for the central plains. Now, as we go on the day on Wednesday, we start to see some relaxation of that trough, and we get a little bit warmer air moving in as we get a slight northwest to southeast flow. Do see low pressure being advertised to develop in southwestern Kansas, but I think that there's not enough time for the moisture to get evected northward to cause any significant issues, maybe a few flurries. We get a reinforcing shot of cool air trying to develop as we go into Thursday as the trough reestablishes itself with the Great Lakes. So the cooler conditions will be most likely in northeast and east central Nebraska, with warmer conditions to the west, and most of the major precip ways off well to our east. Now, as we get on the day on Friday, that trough does once again develop, so we're going to stay cool once again in the east, very warm in the west, and that will eventually start to override our area as we go into next weekend. So high pressure firmly in control. Cool as it is, at least we're not seeing any major significant moisture. That stays over the Great Lakes. And then as we look even farther down the road to the 8 to 14 day forecast for next Thursday, the following Tuesday, that cold air continues to shift toward the east. The warm air to the west looks like it's going to build our way. And then if we look at precipitation, we see an extended area of below normal precipitation that takes us out just before Thanksgiving. The one caution that I will note is the models aggressively during the early part of the week were building a system in between the 17th and the 19th, impacting the central plains. That's disappeared, so that's something we really need to pay attention to as we get closer to next week.
Thanks, Al. That'll do it for today's show. We'll see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.